On this special episode of The World Over Live, we delve into the Catholic universe of Middle-earth and discuss the latest installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy with the film's stars and director. Viggo Mortensen plays the ranger Aragorn, a figure central to the Fellowship.
Great host, you say?
All Isengard is emptied.
How many?
10,000 strong at least.
10,000?
It is an army bred for a single purpose. To destroy the world of men. They will be here by nightfall.
How much time, Viggo, did you spend considering the moral choices of this character and the spiritual elements of Tolkien's original work before approaching this book?
I thought about it a lot because the book, brought to mind a lot of things I'd read or had read to me as a child. And, in reading about Tolkien, the things that it was reminding me most of was Nordic literature and Nordic mythology and pre-Christian,
right.
Or, still so-called pagan literature and culture and mythology and Celtic. But I was also aware in studying more that Tolkien was a very religious man, a very Christian man, a devout Catholic and all that. But I think that it's a tribute to him that he doesn't, in any obvious way, push that in this story, right. And that's why it's not such a simplistic story, nor is it a simplistic movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, or this one, in that all the characters, even the bravest, the leaders as well as the more timid, the experienced as well as the inexperienced, all of them have moments of hesitation, of self-doubt, and I think that makes for a good team member. It makes for a good leader to have a healthy amount of self-doubt, to not be so arrogant as to think that one has the answers at all times. I think that there's an essential integrity and modesty to that, and I think it was interesting that he emphasized that. It's more like real life. Nobody's always has all the answers, and you see that in a lot of movies, and in this one you don't.
You're right.
Which I like.
In that first picture, you were so drawn to the ring. You were drawn yourself to the ring at it for a time. What does the ring represent to you?
I was drawn to it, but I never touched it, and I never do in the story. And Aragorn knows, better than anyone, or as well as Gandalf or Galadriel or Elrond, the true danger of the ring. The ring itself, I don't believe, is evil. I think it symbolizes the potential for evil in all of us, and that whether you're a Christian or not, that you would do well to at all times be vigilant and to keep, firstly, an eye on yourself before you look to others. Don't
cast the first stone.
Right, and I think that's an important element. The ring represents. The ring is there, and Mordor is there. Even Mordor, which has in the story a geographic location, as a symbol of what we call hell, it doesn't really have any location. It is everywhere. It is wherever its victims are, and its victims are any of us in a moment of evil thought or of weak will. As soon as you put yourself ahead of the common good, or separate yourself from others, whether you're a person or whether you're a country, you're with us or you're against us, there's an arrogance to that. You're cutting yourself off from an experience of the wholeness of the world.
Andy Serkis plays the mysterious Gollum, a creature totally obsessed with the ring.
What does the ring represent for you, as an actor and as a character?
Well, as I say, for the character, it's like heroin. It's like the fix. It's like the power that gives him, that kind of power over life, power over which is understandable, as an escape. I mean, it makes him invisible. He can do anything he likes. He feels better. He's morally kind of quite weak, Smeagol, before he gets kind of corrupted by the ring. And so I wanted him not to be too judged by the audience. I wanted them to be able to psychologically work their way into the role.
Sympathize with him.
And as if, if they were in that position and were given the ring and it had affected them in that way, or if their children had, if it happened to your son or daughter, you wouldn't judge them, and I wanted them to be able to kind of...
And Peter Jackson was saying earlier, there really is this, a revelation, if you will, about the nature of evil and the nature of temptation.
Yeah.
Particularly embodied in this character.
It's about choice, and he kind of channels the dark side in a way, but then it overtakes him. He opens himself up to the temptation of the ring, and then it consumes him, and it's got him because he's not strong enough to deal with it, whereas Frodo is strong enough to deal with it.
Did you, there is also enormous sympathy one comes away with this character. You've humanized him, particularly in those monologues where it goes back and forth. You were there on set actually doing this, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whole kind of process. Originally, we shot it kind of fairly conventionally, so I was there and I did it with the other actors, you know, over the year and a half of principal photography, every day, shooting, crawling around, being Gollum. And then there was a whole kind of technological side which is kind of where it crossed over into the animation using motion capture, and that's where you, with the dots and everything.
They wire you.
Yeah, and that's then I kind of act as I can see on screen a computer-generated puppet of him, and I move him in real time to my movements. So.
Amazing. Where did this voice come from? Precious.
Yeah, the voice came from, I wanted to find out where Gollum's pain was trapped, you know. I mean, he's called Gollum because of the way he sounds, but I wanted to find a physicalization for that, a kind of a muscle memory of why his voice is so constricted. I mean, he carries his pain in his throat, obviously. I mean, that kind of comes through from the text. But for me, I had to find a psychological link into that. And so it wasn't just a creature voice. It was a real emotional sort of, had an emotional drive to it. So I kind of thought, well, because he kills his cousin Deagle for the ring, the actual act of doing that, and then the kind of possession that takes hold of him as a result of that, is like triggers off this almost Tourette's kind of convulsion, which is an involuntary action. And so I kind of, that's the emotional kind of route into it. But then I looked at the animalistic kind of side of it, because Tolkien invests Gollum with a lot of animal imagery.
Yes, he does.
And cats, and we had some cats at home. And when, you know, I don't know if you were aware or have cats, but when they have fur balls when they get fur trapped in their throat, their kind of body convulses, and it's an involuntary action that kind of drives into this, and then they're sick, and then so I turned that into a way of him then saying Gollum. So.
Peter Jackson is the director of The Two Towers. He's the first director to ever shoot a trilogy of films consecutively.
We didn't want to invest the films with religious symbolism quite to that degree. I mean, Tolkien was obviously very devout in his beliefs, and we've tried to honour a lot of the themes, a lot of the things that Tolkien felt passionately about, without trying to be overt in any particular direction, you know. I mean, we're trying to make a film, obviously, that can be enjoyed, and the values of the film can be enjoyed by sort of anybody in the world, really.
Right, as the books were. I mean, they were sort of universal in their appeal. But you have here, the imagery is fairly astounding. Resurrection, exorcism, concern for human rights, the environment. Certainly these are very, they are filled with spiritual significance, at least.
They are, and we've tried to honour a lot of that in the films. I mean, we did make a decision very early on that we would put none of our own messages into the film. That we wanted to make a film that if Tolkien was alive and he saw these films, he'd be, whether he liked the films or not, he'd certainly recognise that his themes had been honoured in the films. And so that has been important to us.
And the just war seems to be part of this.
Yes, yes, it is, very much so. I mean, Tolkien, you know, people, you know, this is a war movie, but it's not a pro-war movie. I mean, Tolkien himself was incredibly anti-war, because he obviously had horrific experiences in the Somme in the First World War. You know, he went through World War I, and he only had 3 of his school friends left alive at the end of the First World War. And so he himself was very anti-war, but acknowledged that, you know, and we actually say in this movie that some things are worth fighting for, that you can't be totally anti-war, that if your freedom, you know, if you are being enslaved, if your free will is being crushed, then that possibly is a time that you have to fight for your own freedom.
And would you say this part of the trilogy is particularly concerned with genocide, human rights, and why is that so important today?
Well, I mean, it's as important today as it was in 1937 to 49, which were the years that Tolkien wrote the books. I mean, they're timeless, and it sort of shows in the sense that the world hasn't moved on. I mean, Tolkien was writing about something 50 years ago that he felt strongly about, and those themes are as strong today. You know, and I suspect that in 50 years or 100 years from now, they are going to be strong. I mean, are we ever going to change? I mean, is the world ever actually going to move on? It's not, really. I mean, we're just going to be, there's just going to be fighting, there's going to be squabbles. These themes are going to be are going to go on for centuries, I believe.
And in this film, you particularly capture that struggle that happens within all of us between good and evil, that temptation to both good and evil.
Sure. Well,
how aware were you of that?
Gollum is a great metaphor for that.
Yes. And how aware were you of that as you were making this film, and punching up that theme, if you will, because it runs through all the characters.
Well, Gollum is a very good example of that, because Gollum in this movie, he used to be a gentle, kind creature.
A hobbit, yeah.
A hobbit, basically, and 500 years of owning the ring turned him into this murderous, twisted wretch. And yet, when Frodo shows him compassion, which is the first time anybody has shown him kindness in 500 years, it allows his old self to sort of come back. And the film is as much about mercy and compassion and kindness and what that can do.
And the healing power of that. Why do you think young people particularly are so attracted to this film and it's captured such a worldwide audience?
I think there's various reasons. I think as a movie, it doesn't remind you of any other film you've seen, which is what I'm most proud about it. It as a movie-going experience, it's something a little fresh and different, which I think is a significant factor in why people like to go see it. I think it also, one of the things we took from Tolkien's book, which he was incredibly successful at doing, and we've tried to capture that in the films, is the combination of the epic and the intimate. That this epic landscape, which is as big and epic and huge as you could ever imagine, with warring armies and vast thousands of miles and this huge world in conflict, with the most tiny details of intimate emotion and personal courage and friendship. And that combination worked well in the books, and we've tried to sort of retain that as much as we can in the film.
Elijah Wood is the ring-bearer Frodo, a hobbit who must destroy the all-consuming ring. Frodo's dependable sidekick Sam is played by actor Sean Astin.
This looks strangely familiar. It's because we've been here before. We're going in circles. Oh, what is that horrid stink? I wonder if there's a nasty bug nearby. Can you smell it? Yes. I can smell it. We're not alone.
You are the ring bearer, of course, in this film. What does the ring mean to you? And what should audiences imagine this ring as?
I think it's the embodiment of evil, of power, and how power can corrupt. The old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's that's sort of the embodiment of this ring. It sort of entices those who possess it to think that it's this incredibly beautiful, wonderful thing that will give them all that they desire. In reality, all it is doing is going from person to person, essentially stripping their soul away to eventually end up back in the hands of the Dark Lord. So
it's conquering them and possessing them as much as they're possessing
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Do you see a cultural relevance for this particular film at this time, considering the world situation we're facing? I mean, we have dark forces gathering here to destroy the earth and mankind. Do you sense that is a reality for us here?
I think there are themes in these books that are classic themes, timeless themes, that have been relevant ever since, the release of these novels. Back in the 60s, during the Vietnam War, these books were massively popular.
Right.
And a lot of that had to do with the social situation at the time. Now a lot of people, because of the films, are drawing attention to the novels again, and these themes are coming back. It just happens to be that these movies are coming out at a time in which, it's also very relevant. But I think at any time in history, this will continue to be relevant, because these themes are always going to be present. They're never, in varying degrees certainly, but always present.
There is when he's carrying the ring, there is that sense of heaviness and weight, particularly in the book, and you see it time and time again, particularly as this trilogy unfolds.
That's right.
There's Tolkien equated this to the Passion of Christ. Do you see that? Did you consider that at all as you approached the book?
That's very interesting. Yeah, with the carrying of the cross in terms of. You can certainly draw that comparison. It is a similar struggle.
There is a strong spiritual sense in these pictures. You can almost feel the throbbing approach of evil even when the heroes are on screen.
Sure.
Were you all at all aware of that as you were creating it? Did Peter Jackson stress that to the cast and crew in trying to layer that into the performances?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that he stressed the spiritual tones, although I think they're there without even being addressed. Simply in the efforts that these characters make to overcome the evil that is present. And there's something vastly spiritual about men, binding together against all odds, and fighting for what they believe in and standing up for themselves. I think that there's something very spiritual and very simple about that as well.
Tolkien said that more than Frodo, Sam was the hero of this trilogy. Do you buy that?
Do I buy that? It's funny, as an audience member, as a reader of the books, I absolutely buy it. As an actor who's involved in a really important kind of ensemble cast, I think it's important to retain a healthy perspective. And so I always channel my feelings about Sam's heroism and kind of leadership. I dovetail it into my understanding of his relationship to Frodo, which is one of servitude.
Total devotion and humility and sacrifice.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a minute. How did you work? Did that play in at all, that sense of sacrifice in your preparation for this role? The spiritual aspect at play here?
I don't know. I mean, it's such an amazing opportunity to get an acting job that's going to pay for you to feed your family and travel around the world and be a part of a global cultural phenomenon that to think in terms of sacrifice seems ungrateful. It was definitely hard work, I'll say that. But in terms of
I'm talking about, Sam's sacrifice.
Yeah, in terms of demonstrating loyalty, Sam's sacrifice is great. Not as great as Frodo's. Not as great as Frodo, if you know the books. And
but by the third, he picks Frodo up and carries
You're talking
him the
about
rest of the way.
sacrifice. Frodo is the ring bearer. Frodo carries the weight of the burden of this evil and becomes, he has to suffer the anguish and the pain of that. Sam is allowed to be strong next to him. So I think it's easier to be Sam than to be Frodo. It's easier to be strong and noble and good than it is to suffer, I think.
The courtesy of your hall is somewhat lessened of late. Théoden, King.
He's not welcome.
Brad Dourif plays Grima Wormtongue, a deceiver who poisons the mind of Théoden, King of Rohan, played by Bernard Hill.
A just question, my liege. Late is the hour in which this conjurer chooses to appear. Last spell I name him. Ill news is an ill guest.
Be silent. Keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a witless worm.
You play the king here who is really overtaken by what Tolkien has called a parasitic evil. Did you feel that and have a sense of that spiritual struggle as you prepared for this role?
It kind of grew on me, if you like, as spirituality tends to do. It was difficult at first to get into the layered depths of where evil and good combat each other, until we got to the scene where Gandalf comes in, finds Théoden with the heavy 9.5-hour makeup job on him and stuff like that, and then we go through that kind of exorcism scene.
Right.
But I think the most potent development was as we were doing the film, we realized more and more that the power of evil was something that was going to be the main theme and the strongest theme that goes to the whole trilogy, if you like. Yeah, and it's that this, in subsequent events to having been on the project, we realize now that evil is on the ascendancy.
Mm-hmm. And you, of course, are the embodiment of that evil. Brad, talk about working on this role. It almost has a Shakespearean quality to it. I mean, you're Richard III and every villain wrapped up in one. Insidious, and someone says you have a poisoned tongue at one point. How did you avoid caricature in doing this role?
Well, that's exactly what it was. The challenge is not to be arch, and the challenge is to make him real, and that we all had meetings with Fran and Philippa, and with Peter, where we discussed it at some length what it is we wanted to do, and they tried to pick the things about the character that we really felt strongly about so that they could really write towards what we could perform and what we could really bring to the role so that it would be very specifically an expression of ours, and that it, in my case, we wanted to make Wormtongue human. I think he's tragic and not evil. I think he gives in to fear and allows himself to be corrupted. I mean, everybody has to confront their fear. What you give into and what you don't give into is really your spiritual problem in everyone's life. So in that sense, I've always been aware.
What was it about the book that first piqued your interest and held you?
I think it was the concept that even the smallest person can make the biggest difference.
And perhaps no one is smaller than the determined dwarf Gimli, one of the more diminutive members of the Fellowship, played by the great actor John Rhys Davies.
What business does an elf, a man, and a dwarf have in the Riddermark? Speak quickly. Give me your name, Horsemaster, and I shall give you mine. I would cut off your head, dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground.
You would die before your stroke fell.
Tolkien said of this work that it is fundamentally Catholic and religious. Do you feel that after reading it and taking part in it?
It is fundamentally universal, and it is certainly, at its core, there is a moral center to it, which is one of the things that makes it very unfashionable and hugely relevant.
Why? Why do you believe that?
Well, because, I mean, Tolkien's experience comes from World War I, where he came across evil and death on a scale almost unimaginable. He was a captain in the First Battle of the Somme.
Yes, he was.
Where the British Army lost 20,000 dead in the first day of the first battle. Never mind about the wounded. You know, you don't go through that fire without tempering your values, and it is a great moral tale. And it's basically that there are times when your civilization and your values are challenged. These events may not happen in a single lifetime, they may not happen for a dozen lifetimes, but they do get challenged. And if you do not respond to it, if you do not recognize it, and you do not meet that challenge, you may lose a civilization. And if that doesn't have a relevance and resonance for this time, I don't know what does. You know, I think we live in a time where if we do not get our choices right, what happened to those Buddhas in Afghanistan will be happening to the Pietà, to the David, to our galleries in the West. And our civilization, I think, is online, and we better get this right.
What does this film teach us, and this trilogy teach us about the nature of good and evil, in your estimation?
It actually teaches you, I think, that evil will multiply itself and multiply its miseries in all sorts of ways in which almost the human soul invites the possession, invites the distortion. You know, the Gollum is in so many ways a victim of its own. It's not just the corruption of the ring. It has become corrupted. It has allowed itself to be corrupted. At the same time, the heroic qualities, the spiritual qualities represented by the elf, the earthy qualities represented
Yes.
by the dwarf.
By you.
Yes.
Tell us, what playing that role has done for you. I mean, this is such a departure from everything you've done before. He's such a spunky little character, and so just,
Yes.
and strong, and solid.
That's
He's a
right.
little guy who's overlooked.
That's right. Well, I mean, I think his courage is matchless, his loyalty is great, his heart is good. And I hope it's happened the other way, that through the character, I may have found some of these qualities in my own rather weakened soul.
Why do you think this film has so caught on and captured the imagination? Because of the fact, and I ask it because it does have those unpopular notions that you mentioned early on, these universal qualities, and some of these people don't necessarily want to hear today. So why are they listening?
Because you cannot escape from them. There are certain great truths in life, that we need beauty, that we need justice, that we need judgment, that our soul instinctively yearns for good even at the times when we are being at our basest. This is just the nature of man, and if you can try and escape from it, you can try to deny it, but in the end, I mean, it isn't a question of whether you believe in God or not, it's a question whether God believes in you. And there are those issues that all important art is about how we live, where do we come from, where are we going, what is the right way to live, how do we act justly. And at its heart, good art is moral. It's about moral choice. And Tolkien's work is a monumental piece of fantasy about moral choice.